The federal election will be here before you know it. We've invited many of the Lethbridge candidates to join us in studio, including the People's Party of Canada candidate, Grant Hepworth. Grant, welcome to BCN.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it.
Grant, first of all, why would you want to become a politician? It's not the most popular occupation right now.
I admit that is definitely not something I thought I'd go down. It's a path that, I've always been passionate in politics. I've been following it for decades. I worked the great privilege to work for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. They helped me get a good crash course on what actually happens behind the veil when it comes to government relations. And by dealing with that for several years and dealing with concerns of my clients and such, I realized that there was a lot of problems within the government and such, and it was just getting worse and worse and worse. I had an issue myself with, when I got out of working for CFIB, I decided to start my own business, which, honestly, if you're already working as a lobbyist for businesses, you would think that, well, why would you get into business?
What kind of a business is it?
I run a tobacco harm reduction company. It's a vape shop. We're an education center. And I've been an advocate for the industry since 2008. And studying the science on the topic and what should you do and what you should not do and so on and so forth.
Vaping's in the news a lot right now. A lot of controversy around vaping.
Yeah, there's a ton.
A lot of parents are concerned about their kids vaping products.
Yeah. The key thing to take away from this whole thing is there's actually a lot of misinformation going on. When you look at the States, what's happened is vaping's been around for 15 years. And we have this epidemic, this issue that's come up in the last 3 months in one country, nowhere else on the planet. And it all has to do with what they're vaping. See, vaping is just a delivery method. That's all it is. Vaping can be used to bring in nicotine, to bring in THC, to bring in vitamins, caffeine, you name it. People do a lot of different things with this product. But what these kids are doing is they're getting their hands on illegal THC cartridges that have been cut with a product that is it's called Honeycut, and it's got a vitamin E acetate, which is specific to the cosmetics industry. Now, our industry knows that you do not put oils into any liquid. There are no oils in vaping. It's vegetable glycerin, propylene glycol, flavoring, and nicotine. That's it, or no nicotine. And those constituents have been tested heavily for inhalation since the 40s. We use them in our medical industry and such. This product was developed by a pharmacist. This was not developed by some mad scientist thinking, how can we mess with people? No, it was made to get people off of cigarettes. And that's why I even got into this industry. And being an advocate in this industry, oh my God, seeing what they do with regards to the industries that they don't prefer.
Okay, let's go from vaping to the drug crisis in our city. We have that problem on right now.
We definitely do have that problem
with the
right
opioid crisis.
Yep.
So how can the PPC party really help us, even locally here in Lethbridge?
Locally, it would be analyzing the subject, what governments are actually looking at it. I've seen various conversations, like town halls and stuff like that, and it looks as if the people's concerns are pretty much brushed aside for in a sense, virtue signaling. It's well, we're helping people, so you shouldn't talk about it. It's that's not quite the situation we have here. We have a rampant crime going out of control. Break-ins have skyrocketed to, what was it, 76% in a year's span. That's not a good structure. We've got people moving here from outside of the area to use our facility. They've had a safe injection site in Vancouver, East Vancouver, for decades. They've never had these types of numbers.
Well, 20,000 visits a month right now.
Yeah, that's
Calgary's 65, 65.
5,500, 6,500. Yeah, and we got 20,000. That doesn't really say that, it's just local users. And if it is local users, that's an even bigger problem.
So what's the solution then? Is it more intox, detox, counseling? We shut it down altogether?
We definitely need to have rehab. We definitely need to have more beds for rehab, more people for rehab. We need to have counselors come in. And when these people come in to use the product, it's okay, great, you can use it, but we're going to send you to rehab now. We're not going to arrest you. We're going to send you to rehab. That would be the best optimal step, as opposed to saying, okay, we're just going to arrest you, throw in the prison system, and you're not going to get your help. Because that's what, they don't get the help when they're in the prison system. It's it's a nonviolent crime, so just send them directly to rehab and get them the help. People are saying that it's an infringement on their rights to do that. It's not quite, because we want them to be productive members of society. We want them to contribute. We want them to be with their family and have a good time with life. We don't want them suffering. Like by enabling them, they are suffering, and it's not a good structure to have.
Now, your party leader, Maxime Bernier, has gone on record saying he's not really happy about all the illegal border crossers from upstate New York into Quebec, you know, and he wants to do something about immigration and refugees. What are your thoughts? It's been very controversial.
Well, you know, that's the thing. When it comes to the whole controversial thing, it's who's creating the controversy, who's saying that it is controversial. If you talk to immigrants, they don't think it's an issue. They actually prefer the lessening of more immigrants coming to the country. When it comes to the Roxham Road situation, these are people that are flying in from other countries, going to New York, and then crossing the border. Why can't they make it go to an actual border crossing, like a legitimate one? Why do they choose that location? Because they can skip the queue. They're knowingly breaking the law, and we're accepting them with open arms. So like, it's almost premeditated that they're doing it. And we have tons of official border crossings. Choose one, go through it, apply properly. My friend's wife is an immigrant, and she's been in Canada for, I'd say, close to a decade now. And she's been teaching Japanese and stuff like that. Really, really smart woman and such. But when she finally chose to become a permanent resident, her position was gone. She had to go through a ton of hoops, and it's been, well, a very slow and arduous process for them to actually go that path. Whereas these people, it's just jump ahead of the queue and we're in. We've got 11-year wait times now because of this.
My parents were immigrants as well, coming from Europe. I'm a first-generation Canadian. I remember the process they had to go through. Yeah. My parents also helped establish a business and helped, you know, hire a lot of people with small businesses, and you know, helped stimulate the economy. Let's talk about our economy here in southwestern Alberta. Grant, I mean, it's very agricultural based. How can the PPC party help farmers?
Well, when it comes to farmers, trade is a key issue there. You know, opening up relations with other countries that need our product.
Outside of China, where all the
outside
embargoes
of China,
are.
yeah, we put too many eggs in one basket in that respect, and the whole China situation, it shows, you know, there's been some, I don't know if you'd call it a conspiracy, but it looks like we were played. You know, there's China and the United States are having a battle, having a trade war, and then out of nowhere, we're told to arrest somebody that's basically part of Chinese royalty. So we arrested her. We could have easily just, you know, said that we missed her and had her go on her merry way, because right after that happened, all hell broke loose. We actually could have benefited from the trade war that's going on in the United States with China, because we already had decent relations with China. We could have benefited greatly from that. Instead, we're now being punished, and by both sides. So, well, we've been played. I really, honestly, I do believe, even though it does sound conspiracy-ish, Trump is not an idiot.
So bottom line, open it up to other markets. What about our energy sector and the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion? We need to get that pipeline built here in Alberta.
No, when it comes to the energy sector, the PPC is actually first and foremost about putting through the pipelines. We want to repeal we would immediately repeal both Bill C-48 and Bill C-69, and we would use constitutional powers to put the pipelines through. It's in the Constitution, it's 92 subsection 10. It's existed we've used it over 300 times in this country to build our railways, our highways, lots of infrastructure, dams, things that are of national interest. This is of national interest, to get our pipelines to Tidewater, or our product to Tidewater. And for provinces like BC and Quebec to oppose it, it really isn't their say. It's like, this is truly a federal issue, so it should be federal jurisdiction, and we would use those powers to put it through. Other parties suggest, well, quite a few parties suggest just killing it completely, saying, oh yeah, we're done with oil. It's like, no, we're not. Or, we're running out. And it's like, no, we're not.
So climate change is a big hot button issue as well, this election. A lot of people are talking climate change. What's the PPC plan in tackling climate change?
Well, you know, that's another piece of contention. When it comes to climate change, there's a lot of people that say it's a crisis. It's not a crisis. We don't view it as a crisis at all. There's a lot of opposing views on the topic on both sides of the spectrum. When you look at over the past century, there's been over 130 predictions of the end of the world due to climate change. Not a single one of those instances have come to pass. Zero. Like if we had one or two, we would actually have something to go with, but they've been using the Peter Cry Wolf scenario for over a century, and it still has yet to happen. Like we're supposed to be underwater by now. Vancouver and Toronto shouldn't exist as we currently have this conversation. If all these claims were to come true, they haven't. Okay, why are the people that go around screaming about this topic, they're flying all over the world, they're going to Earth summits in private yachts, and it's like, really? You guys are supposed to be the stewards of this whole movement, and yet you are the biggest polluters on the planet. Our party will actually be focusing on things like land, air, water, preservation and such, to make sure that corporations and major entities are not polluting and running away. Like that is a key issue right there. Like we have BC that's dumping millions of gallons of human waste in our ocean. We have Quebec that's doing the exact same thing to the St. Lawrence River. We've got mining companies in BC that are dumping their wastewater into our riverways and waterways. And everybody's turning a blind eye to that, yet saying CO2 is the worst thing in the world.
The People's Party of Canada also has a plan to balance the budget within 2 years. That's pretty ambitious. How's that going to work?
It's actually not that hard. If you look at a lot of the waste that goes on within the government, it's astounding. Like, there was a report that just came out yesterday and was talking about how much money is given to corporations. Okay, so there was 2014 to 2015, the government, now it's not just the federal government, but the government as a whole, put $29 billion towards businesses, okay? And 14.5 of that was the federal government subsidizing businesses. We got nothing in return from that. We had a lot of businesses that took the money and within a year they vanished off the map. We had very little accountability. The programs that are put in place for this are just, they're appalling. Nobody actually follows up to say, okay, you have a valid business plan, let's move forward with this. A lot of them is just an idea. Oh yeah, great idea, all right, here's a couple $100 million. Yeah, it doesn't pan out, and it ends up hurting us in the long run because, the debt of today is the tax of tomorrow, and that's not something we want to continue to work with. So we would end up cutting, on our docket is to remove corporate welfare completely. So that can range between $5 to $10 billion a year, sometimes $15 billion depending on the time. We also have issues like foreign spending. That is fairly large. Like right now we're committed to, the Liberal government is actually committed to Canada to paying $7.1 billion until 2030 to help abortion in Africa. Okay, so why should that be our expense? That should maybe be their expense, or they can actually discuss that with their own government and see if that's something they want to do as opposed to being forced by a Western nation.
Let's talk about education now here quickly. Okay. Some of the other candidates that came by our studio said that they want to offer free post-secondary. Yeah. Nothing in life is free.
No, it isn't. That's where it comes down to personal responsibility. That's one of the main pillars of our party. And I had the opportunity when I graduated from high school, I had top honors. I had the opportunity to go to university, but I just couldn't afford it. I wanted to go into marine biology or into acupuncture, and it was not realistic. It was going to cost me $40,000 a year, and it was minimum 4-year courses. So
what's the PPC plan?
PPC plan is basically we will be continuing to fund education through the current structure. Like we're not really making many changes in that respect. The main objective is to reduce the amount of money that's going out on the federal government as a whole, and once we have a surplus, then we can start working with addressing these types of issues. For the most part, when you look at some of the disparages when it comes to education, you have to look at the bureaucrats that work within. A lot of these administrators are making a lot of money and then crying wolf that they can't afford to pay for various things within their structures. Like out in Ontario, there was a case with the Ontario School Board crying about a lack of funds. And then within a month saying that they're making an acquisition of 28,000 cell phones for their entire faculty. It's like, wait a minute. So you're spending like $40 million on these cell phones, and yet you don't have any funds for this program over here. You guys you're not spending money properly at all. So that needs to be addressed right there. The PPC, like I said, education is a provincial issue, but we would try and direct more funding to that through proper organizations and tell them where the money needs to go.
People's Party of candidate for Lethbridge, Grant Hepworth, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.